Title: 30. Vanished Money Rules. Farm families lived by to never owe a dime. In 1936, a Nebraska farmer wrote a single sentence in the front of his ledger book: O-W-E, no man. Anything. He kept that ledger for 41 years, writing down every nail, every spool of thread, every dollar that came in or out. When he died, he owned 400 acres free and clear, cash in the bank, and not $1 of debt to his name. His secret was not luck. It was 30 rules his family followed without exception, rules that got quietly erased once banks figured out how much money they were losing every time a farm family refused to borrow. Number 12 on this list is the reason rural banks nearly went broke trying to sell loans in the 1950s. And number 1 was the rule every other rule on this list existed to protect. Before we start, hit that subscribe button, because these are not old-timey habits. They are a debt-free blueprint hiding in plain sight, and almost nobody uses it anymore. Number 30. Never buy what you can grow. A farm family looked at every dollar spent at the general store as a dollar that should have come from their own dirt instead. If it could sprout from a seed or walk on 4 legs, it did not belong on a shopping list, and a household with a half-acre garden could grow the equivalent of $300 to $400 in produce. A season using nothing but seed packets that cost pennies. Store credit was reserved for the handful of things no farm could grow: salt, sugar, coffee, and even then, the bill was settled in full the moment the fall harvest sold. Number 29. Cash for land. Never a mortgage that outlives the crop rotation. Farmers in the 1930s treated land debt as a slow bleed, saving for a decade rather than signing a note that a single failed harvest could not cover, because the Dust Bowl had already shown an entire generation exactly what happened to families who owed the bank more than the drought would let them earn back. Number 28. Feed sack clothing. Flour and feed companies printed their sacks in floral cotton specifically because mothers were already cutting them into dresses and shirts. And by the 1940s, companies competed openly on pattern selection, knowing full well their sacks would end up on a clothesline instead of in a trash pile, saving a family the $2 to $3 it cost to buy fabric outright. Number 27. The threshing crew trade. Neighboring farms rotated labor during harvest, feeding and housing each other's crews in exchange for shared equipment and manpower, meaning an entire wheat harvest across 4 or 5 farms got completed without a single dollar changing hands, only meals, beds, and reciprocated labor. Number 26. Saving seed instead of buying it. A farm family walked the rows every autumn selecting the healthiest ears of corn and hung them in the crib specifically for next year's planting, a habit that by 1950 was saving the average Midwest farm upward of $40 a season, real money against a yearly cash income that rarely cleared $2,000 in the first place. Number 25. The family ledger by the kitchen door. Every farmhouse kept a composition book on a nail or a shelf, and every purchase, no matter how small, got written down that same evening in ink, because a family that could not see where its money went could not control where its money went. The ledger was reviewed together at the table every Sunday evening, children included. So the habit of tracking every cent was taught the same way reading and arithmetic were. Number 24. root cellars over refrigeration bills. A well-packed root cellar held potatoes, carrots, and apples through an entire winter using nothing but dug earth and stone. At a time when a single weekly icebox delivery ran 25 cents, money that a root cellar kept in the family's own pocket instead. Number 23. Rendering your own lard and using every part of the hog. Farm families followed the old saying that you use everything but the squeal, turning fat into lard for cooking, bones into broth, and skin into cracklings. So a single hog butchering in November could feed a family of 6 clear through March without another cent spent on meat. Number 22. No co-signing. Ever. A farmer who co-signed his neighbor's note and then watched that neighbor lose the farm anyway taught every family in the county the same hard lesson passed down for generations. Your signature is worth more than your handshake, and you never risk it for someone else's debt, no matter how close the friendship. Second pattern break. Here is where the rules stop being about spending less and start being about how an entire community insured itself without a single insurance company involved. Number 21. Church and community barn funds. Long before commercial insurance reached rural counties, congregations quietly maintained barn-raising funds, and if a member's barn burned down, the whole community rebuilt it in a single weekend. No premium ever required, just years of reciprocity banked through, showing up for every other family's turn. Number 20. The cream check as untouchable income. The monthly cream check from the local creamery was deposited straight into a separate savings account the moment it arrived, never folded into the household grocery money, because a farm wife who kept that income sealed off could accumulate real savings over a decade, while the rest of the household budget absorbed everything else. In many counties, that separate account was the only money entirely in a woman's own name, and it quietly funded sewing machines, school tuition, and eventually entire second properties. Number 19. Mending before replacing. Always. A torn shirt got patched at the elbow, a broken hoe handle got whittled new from a fence post, and store-bought replacements were reserved only for items too far gone to save. A mindset that stretched a family's clothing and tool budget across years instead of seasons. Number 18. The equipment co-op. Rather than every farm buying its own thresher or hay baler outright, 3 or 4 neighboring families pooled money for a single machine and shared it on a rotating schedule each harvest, cutting equipment costs by 60 to 75% per household, while still getting the crop in on time. Number 17. Hunting and fishing as a grocery line item. A family that filled its smokehouse with venison every autumn and pulled catfish from the creek all summer spent almost nothing on meat from October straight through spring, treating the woods and the water as an extension of the farm's own pantry rather than a hobby. Number 16. The Saturday market side income. Extra eggs, butter, and garden produce got loaded into the wagon every Saturday morning and sold at the county market, a habit that in 1940 could bring in $3 to $5 a week in cash, often the only income a farm wife controlled outright and could spend or save without asking permission. Number 15. No debt during a bad year, only fewer expenses. When drought or a bad price year hit, the answer was never a loan. It was cutting back further still, selling a hog early, delaying a purchase because farm families believed debt taken on during scarcity only compounded that same scarcity the following season. Families who lived through the 1930s watched their indebted neighbors lose everything within a single decade, while the debt-free families simply ate a leaner winter and started fresh the following spring. Third pattern break. The next rules are about raising the next generation to never need any of the first 15. Number 14. Teaching children real chores for real value. Kids were given actual responsibilities, tending chickens, milking before school, weeding after, not as busy work, but because a 10-year-old who understood that labor equaled income grew into an adult who never once confused spending with earning. Number 13. Buying tools once and buying them well. A farmer paid extra for a forged steel plow blade that would outlast 3 cheap ones, understanding plainly that the lowest price today was often the highest price paid over the next 10 years of repairs and replacements. Number 12. Refusing to finance vehicles or machinery on installment plans, a rule so deeply held that rural banks in the 1950s complained openly to trade journals that farm families were the hardest customers on earth to sell interest-bearing loans to because an entire generation had been raised to view a monthly payment as a trap dressed up as convenience. Number 11. The Sunday no-spend rule. Many farm households treated Sunday as a day when absolutely no money changed hands, not even for gasoline or a bottle of soda, a discipline that forced the whole family to plan every purchase in advance rather than react to a sudden impulse in town. Number 10. Growing more than you need on purpose. The garden was always oversized, not from carelessness but from strategy, because surplus vegetables became trade goods for the barter economy, canned inventory for winter, or feed for the animals, and nothing that grew on the property ever truly went to waste. A family that canned 300 jars in late summer was essentially prepaying its own grocery bill 6 months in advance, at a fraction of the store price. Number 9. The Widow's Fund. Rural communities quietly maintained informal funds for widows and families who lost a breadwinner, collected in small weekly contributions from every farm in the township, functioning as a safety net decades before life insurance was ever affordable to a working farm family. Number 8. Keeping the same farm truck for 20 years. A vehicle was maintained down to the last gasket, not replaced, and a farmer who could rebuild his own carburetor in the barn never once faced a car payment across his entire adult life. Number 7. Selling timber only when the price was right, never out of desperation. Farms with woodlots treated standing timber as a long-term asset, harvested strategically over decades rather than clear-cut for a quick cash infusion the moment a hard season hit. Fourth pattern break. These final rules are the ones that actually built generational wealth, not just survival. Number 6. The Christmas savings tin on the mantle. Starting every January, a small tin collected loose coins specifically earmarked for December, so holiday spending never once touched the regular household budget or forced a single unplanned purchase. Number 5. Buying in bulk with neighbors. Sugar, flour, and coffee were ordered by the barrel and split 3 or 4 ways among neighboring families, cutting the per-pound cost nearly in half compared to what a single household paid buying small quantities alone at the store. The same logic applied to seed, fencing wire, and even veterinary visits, since a vet already driving out for one farm would treat 3 more for a fraction of the call-out fee. Number 4. Never selling land, only adding to it. Land sold off during a hard year almost never came back into the family, so farm families treated their acreage as untouchable, cutting every other conceivable expense before ever considering parting with an acre of soil. Neighbors who sold off parcels during the lean years of the 1930s often watched that same ground double and triple in value. Within a generation, land that never came back into the family that once owned it. Number 3. The handshake contract. Deals between neighbors were sealed with a handshake and honored without exception, because a reputation for keeping your word was worth more in a small county than any lawyer's contract, and it kept legal fees entirely out of local transactions for generations. Number 2. Working the land debt-free before ever expanding it. A farm family never bought additional acreage until the home farm itself was fully paid off, resisting the constant pressure to expand on borrowed money even when neighboring land looked tempting and cheap. This single rule was the difference between a family that owned 3 farms outright by the 3rd generation and one that owned nothing but a mortgage on paper. And finally, number 1, live within what the land gives you, not what the bank offers you. Every single rule on this list existed to protect this one principle. A farm's income rose and fell with the weather every single year, and a family that spent according to the bank's generosity instead of the land's actual yield was always one bad season away from losing everything they had built. The families who thrived for generations were the ones who treated their real harvest, not their available credit, as the hard ceiling on their spending. Debt was never a tool to them. It was a warning sign, plain and simple. That Nebraska farmer with the ledger book was not unusual. He was simply one of millions who understood something we have almost entirely forgotten, that the fastest way to lose a farm was never the weather. It was the interest rate. Try one rule this week. Skip one purchase. Patch one thing instead of replacing it. Write down every single dollar you spend for 7 days straight, the way that ledger book demanded. Then come back and tell me what your own family's ledger looks like.